Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It just means peace to everyone, just so you're probably wondering, what is happening? What ritual did I get myself into?
No, I think I understand that.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you again here at Hain at Salma for The Circle. And we're delighted to have with us a truly inspiring and incredible figure, Sara Mitaru-Kimanthi. She is a very famous and successful singer, nominated for an Emmy. Her songs have provided the soundtrack for documentaries by George Clooney and Stevie Wonder, so quite an established name. But as you know, here in The Circle, what we seek to do is take the stories of individuals who've found a way in their individual capacity to tackle challenges facing societies, underscoring the message that no matter how big the challenge is and how small I might be, I can still contribute to changing the reality, improving the world that we live in, and probably beyond what we think we're capable of. And I think Sara embodies that message. So first of all, I want you to join me in welcoming her here to The Circle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, Sara, you've spearheaded and been involved in a number of initiatives to benefit wider society. Mm-hmm. Currently, you're working on an initiative to help children in domestic work, which is a big issue. But previous to that, you've been involved in a UN initiative for improving the habitat.
Yes.
You've been involved in initiatives that sought to further the Millennium Development Goals and reach out to those struggling with development issues. Before we get into that, and I should mention, by the way, she is a United Nations Millennium Goals Ambassador and a United Nations Habitat Messenger of Truth. So you truly must have a busy life. Thank you for carving out some time and coming here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
But I did some reading about you, Sara, about the days when you were first starting, and what caught my attention is how you got into singing. And it wasn't the sort of usual route that my mum gave me singing lessons since I was 2 years old, and I was already set on that career. You had a lucky break because somebody missed their slot.
In the studio.
And you were just a voiceover artist, right?
So I was in a studio in Nairobi. This is the first time I was properly recording, and there was somebody who was going to sing a jingle, and they missed their slot, and I told my boss at the time, I think I can
just
sing.
like that.
Yes.
Hey, let me do it.
Let me try. And
was he okay? Did he think you're crazy? Or?
I think he had a need, and
okay.
Therefore there was a need to meet the need. So I stepped into the studio and I sang a jingle, and they were like, "Oh, you can do this." I said, "I think I can." And so then I started singing in studio jingles over time. That one thing led to another, to recording, and this is where I am today.
Well done. You obviously, you've established your name and your brand, but you didn't stop there. While a lot of people would have been happy and sufficient with making a success in terms of career, as I mentioned in the intro, you've been involved in so many societal initiatives. Why?
I come from the global south, Kenya, which you had mentioned to the people here. And fortunately or unfortunately, we don't get to choose to live a life where we ignore what's happening around us, because it affects us whether we like it or not. It is not a privilege that we have to bury our heads in the sand.
I wish all of humanity really subscribed to that, but I do think you're a little bit special. Not everybody thinks it that way.
I guess in a sense to which I believe that there is more to a person, that we have a purpose to achieve in this life. So it's almost as if it was never enough to be successful, because I have a friend who said he was very successful, but his mother did not have a hospital to go to, you know, and she was unwell. So it forced him to build a hospital in his community or rally with people to build a hospital, because even his mother, despite his success, could not go to the hospital. So the reality of the world that we live in is that we don't get to bury our heads in the sand or ignore. And I've always had a sense to which I have believed that I was created for more than just my ability to sing and more than just my ability to share the music that I have, but to leave a legacy for my children and my children's children that they would have better than we did, which is what my father and my mother did, is that they tried to do what they could that my life would look a little bit different. And so because we are challenged to build transgenerationally, it's therefore within our reality and culture to look at another generation and hope that we can leave a legacy enough for them to not.
And I know that you care about children, because I hope it's okay if I raise
Absolutely.
a loss, a personal loss in your family, right, was part of the reason that you started to think about things that are bigger, shall we say, than just my career, and what can I do to help, particularly children.
Absolutely. I lost my daughter our daughter when she was about 8 months old, and that was a reality whereby the fragility of life was something that we had to interact with, that our time on earth as it is limited. So we have a choice to either have the best time or be part of living a legacy. And I think it was a very, very big wake-up call in my life. And in that, I like to say that our days are numbered, but the things that we do can outdo the days that are numbered.
Thank you for sharing that with
You're
us.
welcome.
You also told me a beautiful sentence earlier when we were talking, and I wrote it down to make sure I don't forget it, that when I was asking you if you ever feel overwhelmed by things, I mean, to embark on UN-backed initiatives, to your own, and we'll come to the Creative for Societal Impact. Was there a moment when you felt, I can't do this? This is, the tsunami of challenges is just too much. What was I thinking?
I think the vision will always be bigger than the person. This is the reality, is that people who have a desire to do more, the vision will always be bigger than you. But there's also the truth that there are others that are called to walk out the journey with you. And so as I'd like to believe I'm still young, as I have grown.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. As the years have gone by, I have come to realize that there are people that will walk the journey with you. And so the vision doesn't have to be something that you carry in its entirety, but different parts will be shared and carried by different people. And it's difficult, but it unfolds itself in the truth of consistency, in being consistent in walking. Others join you as you walk.
Mobilizing people. Let's talk about one of the initiatives that you have been involved in, the Freedom Fund for Domestic Children in Domestic Work. And it's an issue in Kenya, as it is in many countries.
Yes.
But thousands of girls have been freed from domestic work.
Yeah.
What made you think that artists can play a role in that?
So the child domestic work, if you'll allow me to share, has its background from the loss of parents from HIV and AIDS in the western part of the country. Now, if you know anything about Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is that there was a time that HIV and AIDS had weighed heavily on us. Now, what happened is that because of, this is a discussion we could have for a while, about why, but ultimately it led to the loss of parents, So you had young boys and girls that were now being raised by their grandmothers and grandfathers because of HIV and AIDS. The grandparents are too old to work, and there is a need for the other siblings to live it, just basic.
So somebody of the kids has to go out and work to support. So it's a very complex societal issue.
Absolutely. So the 14-year-old would go work at an uncle's place or at someone in the city so that the money goes back to take care of the
to
small
support the rest
kids.
of the family.
So eventually it happened for so long that even when things began to change where HIV/AIDS is concerned, it turned into a subculture. So now you are having 12, 13, sometimes even 10-year-old kids coming into the city or going to homes as child domestic workers. So it is hidden. The reality is, as a culture, we don't talk about it, but it's true. So
And it's not very regulated, the
It's not
circumstances, the
regulated, yes,
standards, the
exactly.
treatment that they may... so you decided that artists can make a difference here.
So myself and my husband and a friend, we started an organization called Creatives for Social Impact. Because we are creatives, we believe that there is a way that we see society that's a little bit different. If you know anything about music, art, film, is that it's almost like we live in the future, you know. We see something invisible and bring it to life. So we asked ourselves, what if we took the same gift and became part of the strategic thinking that affects culture? What if we take the ability to create something and instead come up with ideas that change how people, the culture, which is the attitudes of a group of people, attitudes and behavior of a group of people over time? What if we change their attitudes? What if we affect their behavior? What if we look at the science behind behavioral change and combine that with art? So a bunch of creatives.
So how do you do that? That is very interesting. I think we need another hour just for that. So how do you do that? Is it by portraying, I don't know, in film, the roles, in the lyrics, in the paintings, messages of change in how people relate to these children?
I think it starts from the strategy side. So I will give an example of writing a song. You know, a song will take you through a hard time, or it will remind you of a happy place. And there is a strategy to writing the song. So as you write it, you are thinking, you're trying to translate the mind or the will and the emotions of a person so that they can be able to connect with the song that you're singing. So we take the same idea and say, if everybody is looking at the problem from this angle, why don't we approach it from the other one? What is the behavior here? What makes people do what they do? So I think that what we realized is that we had a gift, and the gift is seeing in between the spaces creatively. So when we are able to establish that strategically, we can then bring creativity in the form of messaging, in the form of art, in the form of music. Sometimes they even take our ideas, sit around round table meetings, and that becomes how they choose to affect change. Because I guess non-creatives say, oh, we didn't look at it that way. We did not see it this way. So there's a way that you can message and pass information that affects behavior. There's a song that say, put up your feet and dance. That's actually behavior. You've actually instructed people to do something. You've got them to move. So that is probably the most simple way I would describe it.
Are you working, is your initiative working on other campaigns and other things?
Absolutely, absolutely. A few years ago, there was the Horn of Africa, which is Somalia, was undergoing a food crisis, which happens every other time. And as we sat around a meeting with friends, we said, you know, we have spoken about food crisis for a long time, and there has been conversations about aid. Why don't we get Africans to act for Africa? And they said, oh, how do we do this? So we said, why don't we call a few friends that are musicians around the world to tweet to the heads of state and say, we want Africans to act. And it worked, you know. So we're able to mobilize, to come up with strategies and do things strictly as creative. So everybody who works with us has blue hair, a few dreadlocks.
I need to, obviously I need to catch up on the head.
And is a creative in their heart and in what they do.
Fantastic, that's beautiful. Now, also another campaign was with UN Habitat. And it was a campaign to change people's perception of African cities, right? And in that time, it started with hundreds of thousands of people participating in this campaign. And I think in the same period over the years, there was a 5% drop in the crime rate. I'm not sure if it's causality or correlation, but can you explain these phenomenon and dynamics of what's happening and how
this
Is it,
thing.
yeah, I mean, do you have a, I'm just curious though, do you have a theory, like were people waking up and feeling better about their cities and, you know, this is...
So the way in which cities had been built over time is that our generation woke up and we found cities, you know. My parents grew up in a different reality. And there was never a sense to which we were excited or proud about where we lived and where we grew up and where we were born. So there was no sense of personal responsibility.
Oh my God, we had an architect a couple of episodes ago,
Yes.
Abdul Wahid Al-Wakil, Professor, he was saying the same thing, so I have to connect you with him.
That's amazing. So we never grew up having a sense of personal responsibility. This is what I would like to call it. It was almost like we were detached from the reality that we have grown in. Now, in our generation, we probably could not understand because it was just, you know, the rat on a wheel, just live, 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 live. So one of the things that we asked and challenged UN Habitat is said, if you are speaking to majority of the continent, which is youth, you know that the young people form the majority in the continent, then you have to appeal to their hearts to see this as their own responsibility as compared to them being told what to do. So they had to be part of the journey of internalizing that this is my city, it's my responsibility to grow trees, to make it look better, you know, for sustainable development. Whatever it is you decide, you cannot build on a foundation where people do not feel a sense of loyalty, a sense of grounding, as you have said, or rootedness. So we asked ourselves as creatives, what is the most simple way to affect their behavior where cities are concerned? And we realized that with the iPhones and all phones, that photography was becoming something that was cool, you know. So we asked a bunch of photographers to get young people on top of the roofs of their cities and take pictures, because every time you Googled a city in Africa, all you saw was slums. If you said Nairobi, you saw Kibera slum. If you said Johannesburg, you saw Soweto and, you know, the ghettos and the filth and the dirt. And so we asked them, is there anything that would make you proud of your city? So they just started taking pictures and tagging, I love Nairobi, I love Senegal, I love Dakar, I love Lagos. And this just happened, and it became a subculture. So the idea was to come up with a strategy that would become a subculture. Suddenly people wanted to plant trees, they wanted things better, and they began to care because they would look at their city and think, oh, I can do something to make it look better.
Beautiful.
So the subculture then turned into a culture where I think now millions just keep posting online, and we changed how they viewed African cities on the internet. And this was a step. It's a step in a longer journey, because we are affecting behavior, we're affecting mindset, but in a way that a generation can be able to interpret, it can be able to understand and then act. So to answer your question about crime rate, when people love the places that they live, they become passionate about making it better. It becomes their own moral responsibility.
And maybe more of a sense of ownership of this place.
Exactly. So they will report who the thieves are. They will tell such and such a person. They know within the community, we know who is behind either crime rates. We begin to inform each other. We begin to put up measures and do what is required to make it safer, whether it's lighting. And there's a broad spectrum of solutions. However, it always has to be carried by the people who live there.
One thing I like about the initiatives that you're involved in is that you are not tackling things in this, if I can say, the typical way that people might come in and say, okay, the solution for crime, just put in harsher penalties. The problem for domestic workers, okay, just change the law. But you actually look deep into the society and try to think about how to connect with people. Absolutely. And make people part of the change rather than just enforcing it from the top down. Have I correctly summarized?
You have.
All right,
you
thank
have.
you.
have said it very well. I think it really is what the gift of being a creative is, because whether it's music, whether it's a film, whether it's a song, whether it's a dance, people respond to that thing. It is people who respond. It's not a command. They buy into it. They love it. they own it, you know. How many times have you shared a piece of music that you felt was yours, that you are giving somebody as a gift or to communicate a message? So to affect culture, ideally, it must be internalized by the people who are hearing about it, who are receiving it, because if they own it, then it will have a snowball effect. It means that all we need to do is push this snowball from the top of a mountain and it will roll down. So another generation will come and find the snowball effect. So we found that this was a different way. I would say it was a miracle that we found a different way of seeing society and wanting to change it, and we chose to walk that journey.
All right, we're getting close to the point where we'll open up the floor for questions, and I think we've got some mics standing by. Okay, so start thinking of your questions, ladies and gentlemen, and when you have a question, put your hand up and we'll get a microphone, or yeah, let's do it that way. But I want to ask you this before we open up for questions, because I think it's a key question that I like to ask all the people I talk to in the circle.
Yeah.
And I think we can all learn from that. How do you mobilize people? How do you mobilize resources? How?
That's a good and difficult question.
Yeah, but it's one of the first barriers, right? When you think, like, I've got a great idea, but I don't have the people, I don't have the resources. How did you go from there to?
What I have found by studying great men and women, and we learn by seeing, you know, and modeling, is that when great people who have gone before us and succeeded, is that in their greatness, when they have chosen to stay the course of living out their purpose, the right people come to them. So the question of mobilization is really about knowing that beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the legacy that I have chosen to live. And as they choose, the word that we use, as they choose to rule in that sphere, the right people always come. Whether it is, if you are...
Is that consistent, Sara?
I believe
on every initiative that you work, you find that people flock to you.
I think that
I can see that, because you've got a very bubbly, lively, lovable personality. Can we all, if I go out there, they're going to look at me in the same way. They're going to, you know?
Absolutely. I think
what is the ingredients for that, I guess, is the
when
question.
you share a dream, you know, with a person, let's say I share my dream with you, you will listen. And you'll share my dream with somebody else. They will listen. Amongst the 5 people that we have spoken with, somebody will feel a sense to which they will come to you and say, I would like to be part of this. I would like to join in it. For those of us who are religious or believe in something bigger than ourselves, we do believe that God has not allowed us to walk a journey alone, but He has placed people around us that eventually will join us to go where we are going. Beautiful. It is a belief that we hold on to, you know, as if it is our last breath of air.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, so maybe now is a good opportunity to open up for questions. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand. It's difficult for me to see from here. I ask for some help from Sam. Do we have any? Or are people still thinking? I can't see. Somebody, while people are thinking of their questions, somebody told me this in one of the circles, that the most important thing is just persistence.
Absolutely.
To keep going.
Yes.
Is that your experience as well?
Yes, absolutely. You must keep going. You must, on the good days or the bad days.
Were there times when you felt like this project is not going to work, but you said, you know what, I'm going to keep going?
All the time.
All the time.
Many times. I think, we have a question?
Okay, so let's get a microphone. Oh, Andy's got a microphone. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Maybe we need some help switching it on. This is why technology is not always helpful, is it?
No.
Okay, I think you're switched on now. If you just start by introducing yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me? So you can't hear me and you can't see me. Okay, you can hear me. No, please. I was Feels like my moisturizer is still drying. Hi, this is Nasser al-Na'ma. I'm actually thankful to have found out about this event at the last minute. I only got the tail end of what you were saying, but it was so interesting because everything feels like divine intervention at times. Admittedly, I was talking about this very thing today. I really enjoyed the last part of what I could catch from what you were saying. There are themes that are universal themes that are, I think, that permeate every geographical boundary. Even when you were talking, it was somewhat reminiscent of, interviews and things I've caught on from one of my favorite authors, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. When someone feels a sense of ownership in a place, and I recall this distinctly from one of the founder, I believe at the time when she lived in Qatar before she repatriated to India, Vani Saraswati, from migrant rights. I definitely noticed that people feel they have more of an impetus to want to engage and want to catalyze change. And that can apply to someone, who's presumably like a stakeholder or local like me or Qatari, and a non-local, because they feel like, people want to see the dividends of their investment in a place where they live and they have a voice, So, not to sort of, what is the word? I'm very, I can be very verbose, but I have a long-winded way of saying, but I always get there. What I'm saying is, people really do feel compelled to want to be the change, and become the change. It's a cliche, but when they feel it's I think contingent on how much ownership they have over something. And they tend to want to do good. I've always, not to toot my own horn, but I've always been, as admittedly a self-proclaimed like outlier, and someone who was neurodivergent and divergent in a lot of ways. I've always been, rooting for the underdog, and because I always felt like one as well. So, but those are the people that I think give the life meaning, and they give us, it's like spices and herbs. There's a lot of seasoning, and if we were all conforming and we were all like pigeonholing ourselves to sort of like whittle out and cotton out our individual sort of nuances and idiosyncrasies, we'd all be, left with nothing, so it would be too uniform, too bland. So I don't know, am I making sense?
No, I think, yes, you are. And 2 thank yous to you. Thank you for coming, even though you heard about it last minute, and thank you for having the courage to get the ball rolling and asking the question. I think that maybe drawing on what Nasser said, how do we get people to develop in them the sense of buy-in when you're doing an initiative and project? Is there a process? Do you have a checklist? What is the process that you're launching this initiative and we want to get people to buy in? I guess you have to have some familiarity with what people appreciate, what they like. Do you cater the message for the people, or do you think, no, I've got to, even if it means I change the people, they've got to see the merits of the message?
I think, like everything else, it begins with, let's say me. I will use myself as an example. You must love the people enough to want better for them. That's just the entry point.
Very beautiful.
It cannot be a ticking the box situation. You must love them enough to want better for them. And when you do, it becomes what guides how you move. So therefore,
there's so many good one-liners. I want to write them down. You love the people, okay, to benefit them.
So then you now begin to see things not from an authoritarian perspective, but understanding the culture. What is the problem? What is the culture? Why are we here? Sometimes it causes us to do some form of research. We sit and we listen. We spend a lot of time asking questions, because we are creative. It's easier for people to receive us, because we are not a threat. We want to learn. When you then begin to stand where people are standing, you will see things from their perspective. So whatever solutions are being brought to the table must cater to them first. It is that you desire that when you take a step back, there will be movement from one place to another, but it is built on wanting better. So this principle applies at a personal level, individual level, corporate level, institutional level, that if that becomes the guiding principle by which we use. So you asked me, how do we go about it? It's always, we must love the people enough to want to see better for them. And ultimately, they will receive it, because I'm not sure that society rejects love.
It's when people recognize that you're
Yes.
doing this because you love them. And you want
Absolutely,
Fantastic.
absolutely.
Do we have any more questions? Put my glasses on. Do we have any hands? Sam, do you see any? We do? All right. Can we get... Does the
Hi,
person have a microphone?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Marla Hames. I've been living in Qatar here for many years. I'm American and a researcher and an analyst. And I've had the very fortunate experience of spending a lot of time in Kenya. My sister, my baby sister, was in the Peace Corps when she graduated college, and she spent 3 years in burnt forest near Eldoret. And as I was listening to you talking about children who have lost their parents to HIV, immediately my mind went to her, because she was working on this very issue. And the solution that they came up with, and she was working with both a health center and a school, and what they decided to do was to build a shamba, or a farm, at the school, and the children would come early in the morning, and they would plant vegetables, and they would work on the shamba, and the funding that they had only hired one person who was a cook. But the kids came early in the morning, and they grew all of their vegetables, and they had food to have their lunch, have their breakfast, even sometimes have their dinner at the school. And it avoided them being able to have, having to go out to work to have money for food. And it's just such a simple solution. And listening to you talk,
I think we may
it
have
went,
lost-
it's
we're back.
the battery. That you're approaching, as a researcher, we find solutions like this and we write reports about it. And I'm wondering how there's so much development work that's happening in Kenya and other countries in the area, and how you can find these snippets of solutions that actually work, and then use the NGO that you have and the creatives that you have and the different ways that you have of spreading the impact. And I just want to know how you actually do this. How are you connecting? What is the mechanism? How are you working with these different institutions to find these small things that work really well, and then really let them fly?
All right. I think the question's clear there. How do you find the solutions?
That's a brilliant question. So at a national level, so what we, as we were speaking before, is that we begin from the ground, which is finding what the issue is, loving the people enough to want to do better for them, and then now pulling it to a national level. So you find that in any national or global level, depending on the project that we're working with. I will address child domestic work, as you have asked this question. So there are very many CSOs, which is small organizations that are community-based on the ground, that are doing things like what you spoke about. And so we have pockets around the country whereby treat it as if, let's say it's a prototype of this is what we are doing to rescue girls or to rescue boys that are child domestic workers. And we are now at the stage where we are beginning to say that there are very many avenues to which this can change as a culture, to then bring it to the national level where we say, this is what's happening in the country. It is not invisible anymore. We are putting it out there, and these are the things that are working. I think over the next 1.5 years, we are putting systems in place that will allow people to call in and talk about the help that they're giving, the help that they need. So we are liaising with organizations and governments to have childline phones, to have media networks that are coming in to do this. So your question falls at a very strategic time in my country, because it's only now that we are now choosing to remove the stereotypical conversation, because as you mentioned, it is a hidden thing. Now we are bringing it to light in the hope that when we get to the next 1.5 years, as a nation, we will then begin to come together. So what we are doing is affecting the mindset behind child domestic work, so that then it moves on its own where people have a sense of obligation. And if we do well, I believe, in the next year and a half, then your sister and her friends will be the ones knowing exactly where to go to share the story. And it is a work in progress. However, it's beautiful to be in a different part of the world and hear that the very thing that we're talking about, there are many, many, many more that have been looking into it to do something. So yes, there are simple solutions, absolutely, and we are working towards have it at a national level. Now what's going to happen is, once we have tackled it at a national level, we want to then move it to a global conversation, because we know, even in South Sudan, that now it's children who are moving into war, you know. So whatever model works, we can then be able to export it to different sections of the continent and the world, and tweak and adapt to be able to be speaking the same language. I hope I have answered your question, and if I have not, please let me know so that I can ensure that I give you a satisfactory answer.
Okay, I don't hear any objections, so I've got to put that one down as a question well answered. Does anyone else have any other questions? Do we have any hands? Oh, okay. Can we get a mic? I see someone running, I guess. We're getting the mic there.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Oh, we can't anymore.
Is this working? All right. My name is Rayan. I am from Lebanon. I've lived here my whole life. I'm currently visiting from Boston, Massachusetts, during my winter vacation from studying there at university. And I have a pretty forward question. You know, I guess what I found, I similarly did come here towards the end of the conversation. What I found really interesting, you know, from my time being in the U.S., I managed to meet a lot of people with this diasporic identity, living particularly in West and I'd say south of Africa, you know, in Rwanda, Kenya, etc., and Uganda. And you know, being as a Lebanese, I found a lot of similarity, you know, with this heritage of culture and tradition. Me being particularly a DJ and a drummer and a bit of a musician and keyboardist, I found like I kind of hit this, I guess, point, for spiritually speaking, where a lot, because of culture itself within, you know, your identity and your heritage, it profoundly plays such a good role in your output as a musician, as a creative, whatever it may be. And my question is this, you know, whether what you're doing, because obviously for me, what I do is for the right reasons, but whether right or wrong, how do you know that how do you know it contributes to something, you know, positive, and its output, you know, is impactful on a broader scale, you know, starting from that, like, you know, from the bottom up, you know?
That's a good question. We've been talking about this actually. And while she's answering, can we get that battery looked at, Sam? If somebody could have a. All right. So yeah, how do you measure the impact of an initiative on society, especially when it's something that is very, as you said, hidden? It's not very obvious. So you might not know the full impact that you have had, right?
We were just speaking about it with Sami, I think, before we started the show, and it was, if I'm quote unquote just an ordinary person living life, what do I do to be able to ensure that I impact society? Brilliant question. I truly believe that for a long time, and forgive me for saying this, we have been measured by scale, you know. The success of a thing has been measured by, oh, it did, by the larger, broader spectrum, it did this on a big scale, it did this on a small scale, but I always simplified to, nobody will ever know my grandmother. But yet she played a huge impact in who I am today. Huge impact. Or my grandfather, who sold goats for my father to go to school. And because my father went to school, he was the first person to wear shoes in his village. And he was the first to jump on a plane. And because he jumped on a plane, he studied food security because he did not come from anything but poverty. But it was my grandfather who raised 3 goats and took them to the market and sold them for this young man to become a college professor. So can we then say that my grandfather did not have an impact in life? No, we cannot. In fact, his impact has been seen through me, because I am seated here, because my father was educated to allow me to live the life where I can jump on a plane and come to Qatar. So we must simplify the fact that if you are living out the life that you are supposed to and that you are put on this earth to do, then indeed your purpose will be like a vibration. It will push through time and it will have greater impact. You just have to know that you know that you know that this one step that I am making ultimately will be part of a huge chorus.
So have faith, have
yes,
conviction.
Have conviction.
Don't lose faith
Don't
in
lose
yourself.
faith, and truly that there is no small deed and there is no big deed. It is a good deed nonetheless. That even the simplicity of in social good, what people like to call social good or kindness, even giving a loaf of bread to that one person, there is impact there. You do not know what it does over time. So we can only be extremely faithful with the little that we have, and it becomes, culture is affected by repeated behavior. When you repeat this behavior over time, it will affect you, it will affect them, and then it will just move into something that is bigger than itself.
We have a saying in this part of the world,
Yes.
It comes from the religion.
Yes.
Even if it's the end of the world and you have a seed in your hand planted, meaning not to undermine the smallest of actions that one can do to benefit the environment.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Amazing.
All right, do we have any other questions?
Hi, my name is Mitch. I'm a surgeon originally from Canada.
Hi, Mitch.
I think my question is probably straightforward, but it's my sense that in some places in the world that may have dysfunctional governments or dysfunctional countries, the governments may find NGOs can show them up and may not actually want to facilitate the work of the NGO because the NGO is doing work that the government by all rights should be doing. I'm curious to know what your experience with the Creatives for Social Impact, have governments been facilitating your work, opposing your work, locally, nationally? What has your experience been with government relations?
Good question.
It's not going to get you in trouble.
No. Okay, so I know the word good question now sounds cliche, Every question we have said, good question.
We are just lucky to have a fantastic audience here.
Absolutely. So Sami asked me this question on the phone, I believe as well, when I was traveling here. This is how I would answer from Creatives for Social Impact. One of the strengths that we have is strategic thinking. But the strategic thinking is informed by our experience and knowledge in the creative space. Now, if you find where governments are concerned, I usually say that we are either very offensive to government or the government likes us because we sing, we dance, we make films.
So it's either black or white.
It's either black or white.
You're either the best friend or the enemy. There's nothing in the middle.
There's nothing in the middle. Now, where we are concerned, I think we are at a tipping point in my country and on the continent whereby we are desperately in need of great ideas that will change things. And so there is a convergence right now whereby it is, how people do things for selfish gain and others do them because this is the good that is required of them. There seems to be a convergence between the need for selfish gain from selfish, state ideas and still the desperation for people to have a better life. And so somehow we seem to have fallen at this convergence. If the conversation really is, let's say, as we spoke earlier about cities or about agriculture or about food security, they are also looking for solutions that can be able to justify why they are in government. So we find that our ideas are at this point, and maybe we are lucky, are being received well across the board because we have run out of, or the old ideas, the archaic way of thinking is not working anymore. A large majority of the people in my country are now young. We are talking about an almost 60 to 70% being young. And if you watch the news, you will see that it was young people that were on the streets demonstrating about the state of our country. And so we cannot ignore an entire generation. So the thinking has had to change, whether you are in agreement with it or not. So as creatives for social impact, what we have found is that we are being put in rooms that we ordinarily wouldn't walk into. And because we, as creatives, we form the fabric of society, they are listening and they are wanting to do what it takes. Do I think there's a point that will clash? It is inevitable. It is inevitable.
How do you deal with that?
I think you prepare psychologically for the fact that this will happen. But if you remain consistent and true to what it is, I said there is no greatness without, you must make enemies along the way. It is mandatory. If everybody likes you, then we have a problem. So the reality of whether these enemies are from the state, whether the enemies are from a culture that is very westernized, we will make enemies along the way. Just keep moving. Eventually, over time, we don't tell the stories of great men and women based on the enemies that they made, but the legacies that they left.
Another great one-liner. Gosh, all right. I can see that you work in the, in the creative industry. All right, maybe there's time for one last question, if anybody has one, before we'll let everyone focus on dinner. Do we have a last question? Sam, can you see anything?
Yeah.
We do?
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, Sara.
I think I know the voice.
Thank you for being here. My name is Fahad, and very inspired by your talk. One thing, having looked at the population of Kenya, it's about 57 million, correct me if I'm wrong, or thereabouts, and there's a percentage of, 30% lives in cities and the rest live in rural areas. Do you see, where's the greatest desperation or disadvantage between those who live in rural areas or those who live in cities? From my understanding, within this context in Qatar, people who historically lived in rural areas are more robust, more adaptive to their environment, have the capacity to live within the means that are accessible to them. It doesn't make them unhappy. It makes them content and in line with the forces that shape their environment and not trying to go against it. Whereas for some of us who decided sometime back in history to industrialize and mechanize and automate our lives, the outcomes seem to have generated a lot of disparities, social inequity, loneliness, separation, etc., etc. So how much of the future of Kenya, or for that matter, Africa, is destined to be shaped by the industrialization of our urban clusters, for which, by all predictions, it seems by 2050, something like 75% of us will live in cities across the globe. And how do we anticipate the kind of issues that we will face in the future if we can't mitigate these, if we can't mitigate them from now? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wow.
So let's start with the first part of that question. City people or rural people? Who's got the bigger issues?
To be honest, I think city people. Honestly, like if we...
It doesn't surprise us, I
it
think.
doesn't. I think it goes without saying city people. This question is at the heart of what we are trying to do as creatives for social impact over the next 15 to 20 years. As I had mentioned earlier, we are now realizing that as young people, we have to make a decision to be at the forefront of the conversation. We also have a responsibility to be at the forefront of shaping culture, because our fathers have done what they could. Now I think that they're at the age where they're looking to us to be able to move things forward.
How do we work on the mitigation, since as Ambassador Fahad was explaining, it seems we're moving towards the cities. It's a trend. How do we see the problems before they...
So we if you know anything about our country, which I'm sure His Excellency does know, is that we are the farmers, Predominantly, if you came into Kenya, across the regions, we've grown up with farming and agriculture and subsistence farming being how we have taken care of ourselves. We have lived off the food on the ground, and our grandmothers, with their subsistence farming, there were trucks going around picking all the tomatoes, all the vegetables, bringing it to the market, and people would have it. Or you would just pick a carrot off the ground and live with it. So for what we call the Generation X, there was a huge migration into the city because that is where jobs were had. There were jobs in the city.
Right.
But then a new generation of millennials and Gen Z became digital in the way that they live their lives. So there was the entry of the mobile sector, which is huge, in that we say there will be no electricity, but there will be a device to charge the phone, whether it's a bike. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There can be places with no electricity, but everybody has a cell phone. So this form of technology bypassed even electricity poles.
Fixed electricity grid.
Exactly. So they will go to the small town, put their phones to charge. People will have little charging spots. This device will work in places where there is pure darkness. So because of technology in this way, we have the mobile money, which is M-Pesa, which is mandatory. We do not even use cards, We transfer money via mobile. Most village, anybody has a way of transacting, whether or not they have electricity. So you have millennials and Gen Z who now entered into the digital world and are making money using their phones. So there is now no need for them to go all the way to the city to get a job. So what are we trying to do? We then looked at it, and I'm lucky enough to have my husband and partner here and business partner that are here. And these are discussions we've had over a long period of time, is that if we now turn the conversation to say that we can actually have subsistence agriculture amongst these two generations, then they will stay outside of the city. So we, for example, all moved out of the city. We started off in the heart of Nairobi, and you find that we just found ourselves, it was now an urban to rural migration.
Right.
And our peers were building homes out of the city. So now we have a way to influence for people to begin to farm for themselves. And you had these vloggers and YouTubers that are still talking about how, I live farm to table. I live farm to table, and this is how I'm taking care of myself. And you have another set of people that is buying land to want to farm. So we truly believe that there is a way within our culture that we can move in the opposite way and make it work.
And artists are playing a role in that?
I think this is our dream. What he has shared is actually
That's our
destination, is to be able to have people within the creative arts say there is another way to live life. There is another way by which we can do it. And agriculture being a reality that we can be able to tap into to go. So we had spoken about what if over the next 5 years we affect the mindsets of millennials and Gen Zs to say, okay, they work offline. With COVID and the pandemic,
yeah, that pushed a lot of people, even industrialized countries, started to think, why do I need to be locked up in an office 9 to 5 and in the heart of the city?
And for us, what it did is it pushed people out of the city. So there are two theories or mindsets that are moving parallel with each other. And our desire and hope is that we will push back and say, we don't actually have to live in the city. We can live outside of the city. We can begin to have development in these places. It is like we said, a huge vision that a small pocket of people that are younger are saying, how do we live like this? To speak from a very basic perspective, I think there was a YouTuber, and these are the people who influence a different generation, who showed themselves packing out of Nairobi to go live by the ocean at the coast. And suddenly there was a 2% bump in people.
Migration out of the city from that one
YouTuber. And they were just showing, guys, we don't have to live like this anymore, and they showed with the kids packing up, and we were all watching saying, no, this is not happening. And they were fine. you know, and they just
The
showed
power of creative artists.
exactly. And so we now were looking at this from the outside looking in, saying, oh, there is a gap for this. And so maybe to try to answer this brilliantly asked question is it is a journey that we are trying our best to steer the ship in a different direction, knowing very well that if we all move towards the city, then we will have completely failed in the society as it looks like today will struggle way more. Will struggle way more. We are not even wired, like Nairobi is small, Mombasa is small, Kisumu is small. And if you came to our country and saw what development was happening with this no grass, you know, these high, tall buildings, and some kids, I remember it was sad because there was a child who had never put their feet on the grass, and we were like, no.
Concrete jungle.
Concrete jungle, so to speak. It is a brilliant question. It is a broad question, and I hope I've tackled a little bit of it. And if I have not,
you've shed some. Everything that you said is, I think, food for thought, and you've shed a little bit of light and prompted our thinking. So, I mean, it's been a pleasure. It's been wonderful talking to you, Sara.
Thank you,
ladies and gentlemen.
Me.
Sara Mitaru-Kimanthi, can we have
me.
You're here till Saturday, so I hope we're going to see more of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it,
Thank
Sara.
you.
Please let us let you get something to eat now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.